Hey, good morning, guys. How y'all doing?
We are doing great. What are you up to these days?
Just actually finished doing some catching drills. That's why I was a minute late on you guys. Sorry about that.
No worries. Are you still working out right now?
Yeah, I'm about to start my lift once I'm done with you guys. So, got a good day of work ahead and ready to get after it.
What's your max bench? We ask all guests that. What's your max bench?
My max bench is not very high. I don't do a lot of benching, and it's that's pretty consistent through baseball, because if your pecs get too big and too tight, then you can have some shoulder problems and things like that. So I never really do max bench. I would say in the past, though, maybe like 250.
So
it's not very high.
I would have said more.
I bet you he could do more. So, kids, let me ask you this, though, because when we're talking about weight room warriors, I think with the Cardinals, you think about Tyler O'Neill, and I'm sure he can throw weight around, but I think for pure strength, and I'm judging books by their cover here, but I bet you Miles Michaelis is an absolute beast in the weight room.
Yeah, I mean he's a strong guy. He's kind of deceptive. He's got a real big frame, but he's super athletic, and he's like a pretty good mix of like power and like explosiveness, because he can jump really well, he can run well. And obviously he's strong too. He's got like dad strength times like 4 or 5.
So it's like that.
So that definitely helps him out.
Well, that reminds me. I had a buddy that lived in Kansas City that played basketball at the Y, and he said Zach Greinke just walked in one time and just gave people just buckets for like hours on end, and then just walked out. So you're saying you've got some of those sneaky guys that you'll roll a basketball out, somebody could just dunk out of nowhere. Somebody might be able to throw a football like 70 yards. You got a few of those guys rolling around.
Absolutely, and I think that's pretty consistent through all baseball. I mean, in my eyes, baseball players are pretty diversified in their skill sets. So you can get some guys that are like freakishly good golfers, good ping pong players. You got basketball players, guys that play football. So baseball players can do an array of different things very well. And then you get a couple guys that are like really, really good at like certain weird things. So I think that just goes along with like maybe having a little too much time on your hands as a baseball player, and then obviously having to hit, throw, run, catch, jump, and do everything. Unlike other sports where, like football, maybe if you're a lineman, you only block people.
Now, you just spent a little time on Miles' boat fishing with him. As you probably know, he is instant offense in terms of post-game interviews, pre-game interviews. But he told me the reason why he takes his fitness level so seriously is that he wants to pitch a lot of innings, and he thinks the added strength and endurance will get him through. But also, just as important, he said he likes to look good, because if you look good, then you play good, and he wants to look good for the wife. I like that.
I think that's about spot on. I think it goes hand in hand. The more in shape you are, obviously you have the more endurance, and you can kind of put the team on your back and carry them for a whole season, 200-plus innings. And then, obviously, if you're able to do that, then you probably look pretty good, too. Good beach body.
That's it. Now, this show, Hot Take Central, is pro-Kiz. We are behind Kiz 100%. All hands, everyone agrees. Okay.
Hand in there.
Now, the Cardinals
Kiz.
Now, the Cardinals did just go out, drop a lot of money on Contreras. Obviously, you know that. A guy who's got a huge upside offensively, who can really help the ball club. Now, you're in a position where you're a catcher, and that's going to cost you some time. Obviously, you're used to it because you were back there sharing time with Yachty. Just your thoughts, though, on the addition of Willson Contreras.
Well, I think, playing against Willson Contreras for a lot of years now, and I've faced him a decent amount of times in the minor leagues when he was on certain rehab starts. It always seems like he was doing rehab against the Memphis Redbirds or Springfield Cardinals or one of the Cardinals affiliates. I got to know him decently well, talked to him. Seems like a good guy, and obviously a really good player. So obviously excited to have him on the team. I mean, a guy that can catch and can hit, especially can hit the way he does, to kind of solidify the middle of that order. I think that's really good for our team. It's something we needed to, if you can replace a Pujols in the middle of the order, one of the best of all time. So if he can kind of live up to what Albert did last year, I think then we'll be in a pretty good place at the end of the season.
And Kiz, when you look at how much you played the last couple of years, and obviously Yachty was banged up, but I mean playing almost 100 games this past year for yourself and 63 the year before. I remember some of the prime Yachty years where the backup catcher never played at all. And I would just think that the way teams seem to be looking at the catching position, where let's say your starter, if it's Contreras, if he's going to catch 110-ish games and they want to DH him for another 20, I mean, that's still, you'd think, 50, 60 games for yourself and a pretty prominent role.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I don't know what the plan is as far as a catching split or anything like that. But obviously, he has DH. He DH'd a lot last year, splitting time with Gomes with the Cubs. So, it seems like in a way that the catching position in Major League Baseball is kind of following the trend of like running backs in the NFL. It's kind of, you maybe a first and second down back, third down back, goal line back. So, I think it's kind of a tandem position nowadays. Obviously, there are a few guys, Real Muto, guys like that do catch 130-plus games or whatever he did. But I feel like that, in a way, is a dying breed because the game's going towards offensive production, and the more you're back there squatting, taking a beating, the less you can produce offensively. So, I mean, I would have to say looking forward, potentially, keep them fresh, let them DH, and be able to mix in and run a good catching tandem this season.
So when you talk about, a lot of gets talked about the offense and what comes in there, but, I think that the biggest part of the job is still coming in and working with the staff and getting used to the guys and figuring out what that's about. How difficult is it, or at least what is the process for coming in and having to learn an entire new staff and figure out everything that goes into that? Because you obviously possess a lot of information and a lot of experience of many of the arms that are on the team already.
Yeah, it's definitely. Now, obviously, I've never had to go and learn a whole new staff, but just speaking from my experience of learning our own staff, and when guys come in, and when I first started going to big league camp and first got up to the big leagues and learning everybody a little bit more in depth, it is tricky, and I guess the word I could use is it's overwhelming because you're trying to learn so much in such a short amount of time that it's just overwhelming. It's hard to do because there's a lot of information. But, I think, kind of using, potentially me as a bridge to kind of help translate some info from our pitchers to Contreras. And obviously, with the new pitching coach, Dusty does a really good job of communicating pitcher strengths and weaknesses. Hopefully it's a quick learning curve for him going into spring training and then going into the season.
Yeah, and I know you will help him along. You're not like Charlie Marlowe, who would probably sabotage the new guy to enhance your own position. That's the way Charlie Marlowe rolls.
Well, hold on.
You're not like that.
Hold on, Kiz. But look at this. So our guy Cam isn't here today, and he runs point on the show. And so you would think that when Cam's not out, that the wily veteran Jim Hayes, who's been in the game for 40 years, he just turned 60 years old. He's a veteran. He's known. You'd think he's the one that wants to run the show. But no, he's too lazy, and he makes me do it.
No,
this is what happens.
Kiz just pointed this out because Kiz is probably the smartest one involved in this discussion.
That's fair.
He said catchers have become like running backs. You have a first down back, a red zone back. I'm now on the clock at 60, and I need to conserve energy. So it's probably better for the show if I don't waste energy taking us in and out of breaks. See, I think that's probably I'm a team first guy. That's the difference. So, Kiz, a lot
Kiz is like, is there a question here?
Yeah, you fired in. I was going to take a shot at you and move on, but you had to get in the way. So, at this point in the season, everything gets put under the microscope. What moves should be made, what moves have been made. A lot of talk has been about the Cardinals starting rotation. If you look at some of the teams that are the elites in baseball and who they have in the rotation, do the Cards match up? I think everyone would agree Jack Flaherty, when healthy, is an ace, and makes the whole rotation that much better. So from what you saw from Jack, what do you think about him? And you don't probably don't talk to him every day, but just your thoughts on him being able to get back to being Jack Flaherty and being an ace.
Well, I think for him, the number one thing is health. I think if he's feeling healthy and he's trusting his stuff, he's that number one guy that he is and that our team needs. So as long as I think he comes into spring training healthy, feeling good, I think everything will just kind of fall back into place for him. I think his mentality is good. He has the right mindset. And then obviously it just comes down to health. I mean, at the end of last year, he's showing stuff that was really, really good. Fastball up to 97 plus, slider as sharp as ever. So the stuff is there. The mindset's there. I think it's just a matter of getting back into the flow of a normal season, a normal spring training, a normal start to the season, and then just getting that flow back. So much of baseball is flow and kind of getting into that groove. So I think once he hits his stride, he's going to be a good ace for us.
We're talking with Cardinals catcher Andrew Knizner. And Kiz, I saw a couple days ago there was a report from John Heyman that the old mystery team is out there. There's always the mystery team, and apparently the mystery team potentially interested in your former college teammate Carlos Rodon is the St. Louis Cardinals. So who knows? And I'm not going to ask you to speak for the organization, but how about this? Just because you played college baseball with Carlos Rodon at North Carolina State, what kind of a guy is he? What kind of a pitcher is he for whichever team signs him here in the future?
Well, I think he's a guy that would fit right into our rotation really nicely. I think he's an absolute competitor. Obviously, playing with him in college, he's absolutely dominant. He especially showed that in college. He was basically unhittable. And then obviously, same sort of thing as Flaherty. When he's healthy and he's out there feeling good and in his rhythm, he's pretty much lights out. Number one, at one point, last year, he's Cy Young talk. So that right there shows you what kind of pitcher he is. He kind of fits the mold of that analytical pitcher of like high swing and miss, getting strikeouts. But he's not very analytically with his mindset, if that makes sense. At least what I can remember and just talking to him, he's a guy that goes out on that mound and competes, and that's where his mindset is. And I think that's why he'd be such a good fit for the Cardinals. Obviously, it'd be cool to reunite with a former teammate. But we'll see how things go. I obviously, I'm not the one making all the decisions.
So, kids, one last thing before we let you go. One of the next things on the docket coming up next month, the winter warm-up. I'm a fan of it. I think there's nothing better to see moms, dads with the kids, because Cardinal baseball means so much to this community, and it's obvious when you're there. But from a player's perspective, you got to sit there and sign for 2 hours. What's it like being in your position?
We love it. Players absolutely love winter warm-up. I think that's why we get such a good turnout from players, is because the players love it. Going back to St. Louis right before spring training kicks off, meeting with the fans, talking with media, and kind of really jump-starting the spring training mindset. 2 hours flies by when you're signing and talking to fans. So really it's nothing for us. We probably wish we could sign longer and be there longer, but obviously we don't run the event and, all the logistics and things like that. But everybody's looking forward to it and finally able to do it again after a couple of years off because of COVID. So everybody, like I said, everybody's excited and ready to kick it off. And
one of the reasons I love you is I don't know if I totally believe Billy, but you're like the guys are excited to see fans and the media and talk to the media.
Half of that was absolutely true, and I think it was the fans.
Yeah,
but
fans, not so much the media. Kids, thanks, buddy. We appreciate it, man.
See you guys.
All right,
see ya. Thank you, sir. Andrew Knizner, right there. Hot Take Central, 590 The Fan, 590thefan.com. Charlie Marlowe, Jimmy the Cat Hayes, Matt Whitener, Nate Lucas, Seth Close on the ones and twos. Always great to hear from Kiz.
Kiz inspires me there. It makes me feel like I need to be getting up even earlier, of course, before the pre-show meeting and maybe lifting a little bit so I'm better on air myself.
I'm telling you, when you hear that guy and he's talking about the Cards going out and saying we need a catcher, And to have that kind of attitude, I think folks would say, how much of that is real? Kiz is the real deal.
No,
He's just an upbeat guy.
Yeah,
he really is.
That's 100% genuine. The Cardinals have got a interesting catching situation coming into the spring because you've obviously got the guy you've went out and acquired to be your everyday and Willson Contreras, but you still, to his point, I think brought up something I think is important and got talked about when the Astros were a possibility for Contreras, that there is some bounce around ability for Contreras too. Maybe not every day. You brought him here to catch, but that's a guy that can DH. That's a guy that can also, on the 2% of games that Goldie isn't at first base, can slide over. Another guy that even they talked a little bit about left field. I'm not going too deep into that here, but it's a potential. I think there's a lot that Contreras can bring that still brings flexibility for, say, a Kiz, and also for Ivan Herrera, who I don't think the team is ready to just completely give up on that long-term potential either.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
And Kiz has an opportunity. Look, you would think for at least for 2023 that he's going to be a prominent backup that probably catches. If Contreras stays healthy, Kiz is probably going to catch somewhere between 50 and 60, maybe 65 games. Who knows? And all through the minor leagues, Kiz was looked upon as an offensive catcher. And we haven't really seen that at the big league level, but that's been him since North Carolina State and all through the minors.
Always hit.
And he's not that old. I understand he's got about 4 years in the big leagues, but he still has an opportunity to be a contributing player for the Cardinals. And look, you look at the Contreras contract. I would think the Cardinals probably think, all right, 5-year deal. You're thinking for sure Contreras is your starter for 3 of those years, probably hoping 4. But then maybe the back end of that, that's where it becomes a timeshare. And maybe even in that last year, I know there's an option. Maybe that's where Contreras is then the backup to the future catcher.
Well,
now that's 4 or 5 years away. Don't get me wrong, but that's probably the plan.
For his career, Willson Contreras, and I think Kiz made this point too. For his career, Willson Contreras has averaged 120 games total in full seasons, period. That's not all injuries facts. Some of that's just the load maintenance of what being a catcher is. One thing I think is going to take some adjustment, so I want to speak to this early on. What you just had with Yachty in every way, shape, and form for all those years was not normal. He caught an extraordinarily high volume of games in comparison to other teams and what you see there. So you're going to see your backup catchers and the people, the options you have there are going to be more important now than it's ever been before in at least the last 20 years in St. Louis.
Yeah, Contreras never played in 150 games. I
138 is his career high back in 2018.
That's playing other positions too.
Yeah.
DHing a little bit in there. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully Kiz gets it going offensively. I know, too, as a backup catcher, there's a lot of responsibilities in terms of preparation, and maybe he's focusing on that. But he, as you point out, Charlie, he's been a good offensive player throughout his career in the minor leagues. I'd like to see him get to some of that.
All right, so this is interesting, I think. This is draftbuddy.com, so it's a fantasy site, but I just typed in most games caught as a catcher 2022. So as Kiz said, it's Real Muto, 133 games at catcher.
Oof, big
number. He DH'd 3. He played first base for 3. There's a big drop-off. Guess who's number 2? Sean Murphy. Mm-hmm. Sean Murphy of the A's caught 116 games. He DH'd 30 games. So after Real Muto, everybody else is catching 116, 115, 113, 112. So again, I mean, even if Contreras is at the top end of that second tier, let's say it's 115 games, that's a nice minimum of 50 games for Kiz to be out there, you'd think.
You bring up Sean Murphy, and one thing I thought about yesterday is that when you saw that trade with him, now landing with the Atlanta Braves and the three-way involving the Brewers and whatnot, and also added another potentially strong offensive catching option to the NL Central with William Contreras coming over, Wilson's younger brother, too. Do you think that the Murphy trade, if you just look at it for apples to apples, was a little bit different when you look at what the cost would have cost the Cardinals compared to the teams that they actually worked it out with?
Timing, right? I think initially, if you're the A's, you are thinking we can get this, this, and this. And then eventually, as teams go in other directions, like the Cardinals, then it's a game of musical chairs. I want to make sure we got a deal before the music stops playing. Conversely, my guess would be that if the Cards had waited and Murphy was still out there, maybe teams might have shifted and maybe they wouldn't have had to put the 5th year in for Contreras. All that speculation. I'll say this, too, though. People are like, well, maybe we wouldn't have to give so much to get Murphy. Having seen Contreras and what he said and already knowing both guys' stats, I'm really happy with what the Cardinals did.
Agreed. And I don't know all these prospects. It does seem like that haul was not nearly what was reported to be the haul that the Cardinals would have to send that way. And all along, I thought from the get-go that, to me, Murphy was the best available option, and that's just because overall catching and age. He's 2.5 years younger, and I think that matters at the catching position. But I was never down on Willson Contreras. And the fact that you got the best free agent at a position that was your biggest need, I mean, how can you be mad about that? Yeah, maybe the 5th year isn't great, but you got a top 5 offensive catcher in baseball, and that was the spot you really, really needed to upgrade.
And all you had to spend was money.
Good.
You didn't have to give away prospects or pieces.
You still got a lot of options in play for what else needs to happen here.
And by the way, his 90 games caught was tied for 22nd in all of baseball last year for games caught. So he played quite a bit. Remember, Yachty was injured for a lot of that year.
And I didn't look this up, but I'm just going by the eye test. Offensively, it seems like even when his average was lower, he was hitting the ball hard. Then he brought his average back up. He was below 200, and he did it with I remember a stretch where he was 8 for 11, and all the hits were bloops and dunkers, and that kind of at least got him around 200 or back to 200. He's better than that.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to, we're looking for positives here. He ended the year tough, but he did have that stretch there. Look, his June was really bad, but he was very good in July and August. So he has that in him. He just needs the consistency. He was a better second half hitter, certainly batting average and slugging percentage. So if he can get closer to that, if you can just kind of tick your way up closer to league average as a backup catcher, that's not the worst thing in the world.
I mean, and I think it falls into the trend that we're talking about with a lot of things with this roster. I think that if you fast forward and you look at what could happen for a lot of the people that we've talked about, I mean, you could have a team that you don't need to go out and add a ton of things to. You just need to add the right things to. And I think that that's really the challenge for what the Cardinals got to get accomplished now.
I think their biggest challenge is figuring out what pieces fit where. They got a lot of really good options, and you're trying to maximize what you do, and you got too many players for too many slots to try to get the most out of all of them.